to the CHE community meeting. Today is 18th of October, and as usual, let's start from releases section. I would like to just remind you that the corresponding info you can find in the Mattermost channel about releases. But today we have one topic, and the first one from Mario. So Mario, could you start, please?
Yes, I'm going to share my screen so that I can present that. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
That's actually, so I wanted to start from our roadmap, just to provide an update. So on the wiki of Eclipse CHE, so we have now this is more like 6 months. So that's things that we're going to work on in the next 3 months. But so some of those epics here are actually the estimation is to finish them in 6 months rather than 3 months. But that's basically identify our direction currently. And one of those actually is the production-ready support for Visual Studio Code as a CHE editor. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. That's something that we actually, since we wanted to support it with, as we support TIA, so supporting Visual Studio Code extensions running in a container, and we have workspaces defined specified from a dev file. So actually, we add to think about how to implement that, and Florent has done a proof of concept of it, and it's based on the description that is here, and that I wanted to present rapidly. Okay, but that represents. So I mean, I think that we should focus. I want to make sure that we understand the problem. The problem really is we want to be able to run Visual Studio Code as a CHE editor. Okay, so and our model today is at least with until like the default one with the dev workspace, before the dev workspace engine. It was actually to have, if we have a dev file and a few extensions, those are actually represented in a pod that has like a couple of containers for the components of the dev file. Then there is another container for TIA, and there are containers for extensions. Sometimes extension run in TIA container, but they can definitely have their container to run isolated, so they have the prerequisite there. So this approach for Visual Studio Code as a problem, because to be able to run a Visual Studio Code extension in a sidecar, we actually had to adapt the API, TIA API, the TIA extension, the TIA plugin API, to be able to figure out that there are extensions that are running remotely. And that also has introduced a lot of bugs and problems in the past. And we have been able, so we've put a lot of work to be able to run that. So we are able to run a lot of extensions in remote containers, but we spent a lot of time to be able to implement that and to maintain that. Even today, we still spend a lot of time to implement that. So with Visual Studio Code, we could decide to implement that as well, but that would have taken time. So we thought instead of like spending a lot of time to be able to run extensions in a remote container, why aren't we going to run? So why don't we try another model that is running extensions with Visual Studio Code? And that is actually what I've put here, like having Visual Studio Code and the extensions in the container that is described by the user dev file. So injecting Visual Studio Code and the extension in that container. So that's one. That's at least that has been how the POC, Florent POC, has been implemented. And the TIA for dev workspace, at least to reduce the number of workspaces of containers in the pod today. It works a little bit different than it used to work, in the sense that by default, the Visual Studio Code extensions are run in the first container of the dev file. So here we're still TIA in one container. That is good, because when it's updated, so TIA is already in a container, so it's just a matter of running a container. And when there is an update, we don't need to change anything in this dev file. It's pretty easy. It's isolated, so it's idle. But it's still running TIA in one container and Visual Studio Code extensions in another remote container. And that's cool also because if the user has a dev file with one container where he has his development tools, then the extension can benefit of those tools, and those extensions will probably require like Maven, Java, or Go, or Python, or whatever, Git, etc. Whatever tool you probably are using in your development environment, if you then need that for your extension. So instead of having tools splitted in multiple containers, you have all the tools that you need in one container. So that's I think it's the ideal thing. We didn't want to go that with Visual Studio Code because, again, we didn't want to spend time to implement running the Visual Studio Code extensions remotely. But that said, there has been a few concerns that have been raised by and I think that's basically our the controller team was raising those concerns, and I think that if I try to sum up the main thing that are problematic today, so I've put that I was looking at some slides here and create some slides to make things more clear. So there are two issues with the current Visual Studio Code model. So first of all, is how to update resources like CPU and RAM. So if we go back to the Visual Studio Code, like we are injecting Visual Studio Code and the extensions in the dev file component. So if the user has defined that his component would require 1 GB of RAM, and then we inject Visual Studio Code and some extension that require 2 GB of RAM, there will be a problem, right? Things went wrong. So that's one thing that so we should somehow find create a mechanism to actually update the resources required, so the limits and the request of CPU and RAM for that first component. So that's the first problem. And second problem is how to start Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code is injected here in the dev file component, but this dev file component will have is entry point. So, and we cannot override the entry point of that component with Visual Studio Code, because that's something that is problematic for how that file. So since the Visual Studio Code is defined in its own dev file, we cannot override the entry point of the user dev file, and we usually never override the entry point. So that's something that we didn't want to do. So we don't want to. So how to do that? So the solution will be to implement the pre-start event that exists. So sorry, the post-start event of the dev file. So today, the dev file version 2 has events, and you can define some commands that will be executed pre-start, and those are usually init container or post-start. So usually those are commands that are executed after, but we never implemented them. So we should implement those two things. And there are other things around volumes as well, but those are like things that we are about to solve in a way or another, at least for Che, that will be solved. But those 2 points are not solved yet, at least not that I'm aware of. So I think that the one solution that we can propose is, instead of having Visual Studio Code and the extensions injected in the dev file component, we could have, until we got these two things solved, we could have actually Visual Studio Code and the extensions running in their container, but in one container. So if I want to represent that, that would be something like so one container where I actually run so that has one problem, that is a problem of the tooling. The tooling that is, so we can have like different so the tools that are in the Visual Studio Code image should be actually tools that are able to run the extension, and maybe like not the same of the one that are in the dev file component. So I don't think that's ideal. We should move forward. So we should actually target this scenario here, but at least at the beginning, I think that was something that was mentioned by Sergi in his document, is that we could have this scenario here, like having Visual Studio Code and the extensions in their container, using one container that is like the default container. If no container is specified, and so initially it will be the default container where Visual Studio Code and the extension will run. And when we have implemented those, like the two problems that we still have, we can then move forward with that implementation. Is there any comment, question?
Yeah, maybe just quickly, you mentioned that problem with volumes are going to be solved soon in some way. one or another, and what are our alternatives?
No, so the problem of the volume, I didn't want to bring them here in the equation because those are not shape problems. Those are like dev workspace problems. In the sense that when we create the dev workspace of a workspace, Che controls that. So he can inject in the dev workspace, he can inject the volume where actually the Visual Studio Code will be copied, right? So the way to add Visual Studio Code here is with a volume where we're gonna copy Visual Studio Code, right? So that's something that it's already in the POC. That's already working. The thing that is not working are those two things. So I don't think we already. So I think that we can discuss about solution for those, but there is no solution right now.
We are talking about production-ready VS Code, right? And with ephemeral volumes, so it may have issues in production.
What do you mean with ephemeral volumes? Who talk about?
I mean, the latest understanding that I had is that we do container which uses empty dir volume, and then it put the binaries there, and in such a way the file component one gets the editor binary in. But yeah, I'm fine if we say that it's going to live in PVC at this point.
But I don't see why it should be a concern, because for plugins, I think plugins volume is an ephemeral volume today.
I thought that we cache
it will use the
plugins, and it's in PVC.
Yeah, but it will use the same approach here. So.
Okay.
But anyway, so just to clarify, so the solution here that I'm proposing here, that one. So let me just make it clear. Is like an intermediate solution that doesn't have this problem, right? Because in this case, that the dev file that defines this component here will have a volume already defined.
But it introduces other kind of problems. Yes,
it introduces other kinds of problems. But I wanted just to discuss if that could be like one first iteration, because I think that we can say we don't want to solve those two problems. So those are like issues that doesn't make it ready for production ready if we don't solve those two problems here. It's not production ready. So maybe instead of solving those two problems right away, we can just make it like that as the first iteration.
But this one won't be production ready as well.
Why not?
Because it means that all the languages need to be inside VS Code as well.
That's so we're gonna use so we are building like the one image that should have all the tools for running our extensions. So I mean that's basically what we currently have today. So you will be able to run language server in that image.
But today, all the dev file 2 samples have already the universal image. So we'll have two containers with exactly the same image, almost the same image. But
no, yeah. It's like we can, but we can have just the Visual Studio Code image, not so just the. So what I mean is that we can implement it as we have today, in the sense that we don't have an image for Visual Studio Code. We have the universal image, and the universal image will actually have a volume, and we still have an init container that that copies Visual Studio Code in the volume, and the things that change is that we control the entry point, so we don't need the post start. Okay, we control the resources, the definition of the resources of that image. So for our examples, I think that we actually won't really need a def file with a particular component. So it will just be one def file with no component, with a list of commands, because we'll need commands to execute, to run the examples. We'll have the extension JSON that will require the list of extensions. So I'm just trying to figure out if there is a way to, like, having something that doesn't have the volumes problem that we have today, the problem with resources, and the problem with the post start, and to make it one iteration. The second iteration will be to get here.
But then, as all the samples are using the universal developer image, this developer image could have in the entry point a way to execute a post start event as well, and then to execute VS Code.
So, what you are proposing?
I mean, we master the entry point of the universal developer image.
Yeah.
Like we have in the current Sidecar image, we are able to have like the entry point executing an additional post start command. For example, today the current Sidecar image are executing the TIA endpoint. So we could have the same way, like the universal developer image executing the VS Code entry point.
Yeah, but so that image is not used by only by, it's not for Che. It's an image.
Yeah, but I mean, it can be generic. Like you have like the Sidecar image where you can define an environment variable and then it executes post start command.
But why can't we go with, because so the reason why I think we need any way to implement that is that there are cases like when there is no def file.
Yeah, but we say that if we don't have any def file, the resolver should add the universal developer.
Exactly. But how do you specify that in the dev workspace world?
It's not in the dev workspace world, it's in the Che world, because Che, it is Che that is responsible to create the file when you specify.
Yeah, but what I mean is that somehow if in the dev workspace world you want to say, hey, this is my editor and this is my Git repository, and yeah, you want to start a workspace that injects, so where you're gonna use this editor, and you don't actually have a dev file. What should a client do? It doesn't know how to run Visual Studio Code at all. So I think it would be better to anyway define a container that can run Visual Studio Code. I think it's good that in the dev file that defines Visual Studio Code, we actually say the default container. So if there is no other container to inject Visual Studio Code, so the backup container to run Visual Studio Code is the universal image, so that It's something that is defined in the definition of Visual Studio Code. And
do we have notion of editor on dev workspace level?
No. It's just that we can add an attribute. Like we have a not editor, but we have a backup component. We can call it like backup component, right? So if we can put an attribute saying this is actually a component that you can use if there is no other component IDE terminal component that will actually that exists in the dev file.
Yeah, but we don't have a notion of IDE on dev workspace level up to determine if there is a IDE or not.
Well, I don't know if but so we could add an attribute like IDE terminal component, so we can specify that actually there is so we can say, okay, I have a dev file, right? The user has a dev file, and the user flag can flag the dev file, so the like one component with IDE terminal component. So you can say, okay, and he can put it in the attributes of his dev file. If he does not do that, it's like today. Like the first one is the one that we consider the IDE terminal, right? If it doesn't specify that, we consider that. So what?
Okay, that's technical details. I just missed the where the workspace ends and chair starts. I mean, we tried to keep the workspace as simple as possible without knowing anything about editors, IDEs. It's just dev file which can be merged with another dev file, and in the end you will get flattened dev file which will be run. And this about adding some IDE specific stuff, and it may be okay. I just don't get that margins. What is dev workspace and what is chair in that proposal? Well, but it's technical details. We can move forward, I think.
Yeah, I mean that's something that for me is just a kind of clarification. So today, the fact that we are injecting Visual Studio Code in like the first arbitrary component is something that is fragile, right? So we need somehow to say, hey, so we need to an attribute or something that say Visual Studio Code or the extensions need to be in component 1 or component 2. That's something that, as you say, it's an implementation delay. That's something that may be implemented on the Chase side, like the how to react to the fact that there is this attribute. So in which component Visual Studio Code need to be run. But what I wanted to introduce is a way to specify this container that is the backup container for Visual Studio Code and the extensions. That's because we need it if there is no the file, and we can use it also to run a first iteration where we don't need to worry about the current issues.
But if there is no dev file, I mean, the responsibility is in Che, so Che can provide an additional container.
But that's the point.
If we are talking on the issue under the RAM, then we can add the memory of the extension on top of the user dev file as well, if we would.
We can,
but to me it's not. It's already a step 0 or step 1. We don't need that for the step 1 to manage the memory. Yeah. By doing
so, I mean, if you're not injecting Visual Studio Code and extension in the first component, you don't need really to update the memory. So it's like the first. In the first step, you don't need to deal with the first problem. You will need if you want to do that.
It's still the same problem, because if you are saying if you say, for example, VS Code needs 1 GB of memory, then you want to add Java, then how do you know that you will need more memory? So it's the same problem. So we are not solving anything. So
that's true. I mean, you're solving it. At least you don't need to. You need only to add that to this image that is the editor image. You don't need to to the component that is the editor component. But that's true. So that's like something that anyway, it's a problem that we have today. So we need to solve that even for TIA-based workspaces, because we're not doing that today. Those extensions are injected, and so somehow that need to be solved. But so at least we solve it for Visual Studio Code. So it's just a problem of container, not that we control, that we define, that is actually the editor container. So I think that we spend half an hour discussing it. I don't want to. I don't want us to take a decision on that now. I don't want to have a discussion. So, but if you can, please have a look at the proposal and just comment there if there is any for any concern about like those approaches. I mean, that's just one proposal to solve, to make it in 2 steps, but we can see if there are other proposals, or if there is an idea to. So if you want to go directly to that proposal, that's perfect.
So Mario, could you please make it clear which 2 steps did you mean? Make it in 2 steps.
So this, instead of implementing, so what has been done by Florent in his POC is that he's injecting Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio Code extensions in the first component of the dev file. So there is no container that runs Visual Studio Code, not dedicated container for running Visual Studio Code. Okay, so that looks like a big step, like a big change for our model, where we always have one container for the editor, one isolated container for the editor. So if that represents a big step to move forward, so what I propose is, okay, let's do that. Let's get here to that model in 2 steps. First step is, let's run Visual Studio Code with its extensions in their dedicated container. Okay, so that's the first step, and then the second step would be to implementing these 2 things, like updating the resources of a dev file component with the CPU and RAM of Visual Studio Code and extensions, implementing the post-start event in the dev file, and then being able to get here. That would be the second step.
Okay, I see. So, and we should continue supporting the editor in parallel, yeah, while doing the steps.
Yeah, I mean, so we never, I mean, that's been discussed in the past. So we're going to introduce Visual Studio Code, but we're not going to stop supporting TIA, at least now.
but set of extensions will be different, yeah? So if you take one div file and change editor from here to VS Code, it will not work, yeah? So we should have separate set of extensions compatible with VS Code, yeah?
Yeah, that's another topic, but yeah, that's I think it's
I think that may be another topic, but I think this topic is not open enough. The issue says that it's just a matter of iteration if we run TIA in the same way, but actually we don't have the full workflow for TIA in dev workspaces. So we have that issue with synchronization dev file back to project's file system. And I just don't understand how that it can be possible with that inject sidecar policy, how that's called. Yeah, that sidecar policy use dev container. So we change a lot in the dev file, user's dev file, and we don't have a way to distinguish where it's user's dev file, where it's TIA plugins, and how then backport the changes. So maybe it's a sign that we should take a look on the format we have in dev workspace and see maybe in TIA it makes more sense to run in the same way, where we will distinguish user's dev file and then what needs to be injected into dev container, right? Yeah, because currently dev workspace don't support fully neither TIA, neither VS Code, I would say, the full flow. And at the time with that proposal, we continue moving forward two directions, and maybe it's a question of saving effort and moving only one. We just need to decide which is better and why.
So yeah, I think that there is something to clarify here, because you're mixing like the dev workspace work, that is priority number 1, and Visual Studio Code, that is like priority number 2. So we need to release dev workspace with TIA. That's number 1 priority. Okay, so if then so the question from Dimitro was about the different kind of extensions that will run with Visual Studio Code. So not related really to that problem. So I hear your concerns, but you're mixing, like, I don't know why, but Visual Studio Code extensions for Visual Studio Code with like the dev workspace work and model. I think that so for the extensions, I think it's separate because we can support the Visual Studio Code extensions that run on TIA. We can support them with Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code is able to run those Visual Studio Code extensions. But Visual Studio Code can run more recent Visual Studio Code extensions. So maybe at some point we want to have two different extensions catalog with the two list of those two set, the extension that work with TIA and the extension that work with Visual Studio Code. But I would make it simple at the beginning and just reusing the ones that are used by TIA. So at least that's my understanding for the question from Dimitro.
Yeah, just thank you for your answer. As far as I understand, VS Code editor doesn't go to code ready workspaces, so TIA should still
Why
be
not?
supported. Or maybe I'm wrong. As I said, if I understood it correctly, because it's VS Code couldn't be provided to customers as a...
Why not? They're requesting it. They will be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
really?
Yeah, they will be. So they would like to have it.
Interesting.
So it's like IntelliJ, right?
Mhm.
That's something that customers are looking for.
I thought it's Microsoft product, so you couldn't. But anyway, doesn't matter. Thank you. Clarification. So in that case, yeah, we can stick to one model, one mod, VS Code support in near future.
I mean, it's so from at least from a specification point of view, I see like the just a matter of you have one dev file that defines TIA and one dev file that defines Visual Code. Those dev files are not identical, and we can play with them to actually decide to switch between these, like where TIA will run in his container and Visual Code in their container, in a separate container. And this model is not a different logic in, so like a big if and say, okay, we have two different branches, one of the code, one is for Visual Code and one is for TIA. It's just that we define Visual Code saying it runs in one container of the user, and we define TIA saying no, it runs in its dedicated container.
The same extension, yeah?
The extensions will be the same, yeah. They will come from the plugin registry.
But we should ensure it's compatible. This was defined.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments here?
Yeah, I have a question. Like the dev workspace part and Chatia is priority number 1, and where it is in roadmap, is it production ready to file v2 based workspaces through dev workspace operator in cloud native theme?
Yeah, it's this one that actually has like estimated like Q4, and whereas this one is Q1 of next year. And so yeah, I sent out an email on Friday for the team leads, so Red Hat team leads, mentioning if they please could prioritize items so for next sprint planning based on that, so on that roadmap, but putting like the top number 1 priority in the roadmap is this one. And for planning, so the number 1 priority anyway, even more priority than this one, are always bugs. If there are P1 or blocker bugs, they should be fixed. So they should be planned at least before anything else.
Okay. And is that topic up to date? Because it references milestone, and I assume the items in milestone and in the epic itself, in the epic description, are different. Like I see share multi-cluster support using one dev workspace operator per cluster, and I'm not sure if there is any work planned to that and any need to be in milestone 3.
So I think that's so you don't. If you mean here, do you mean in the milestone, or do you mean in the description of the?
In the description, like
no, the description of the epic may not be up to date. So I'm sure that that's not up to date. But that's up to date. That's what we have been reviewing, right? So I'm confused here. So you've been working on that for months, and it looks like so it's a surprise for you that actually we're not referring that as the source of the things we're working on, right? That's and that's actually this description here is the thing that you're looking at. So that's kind of looks like provocative, Sergi. But
Well, I don't see anything provocative. It's just
well,
know that in roadmap for community we reference that epic that is not up to date. So what is the?
Well, it's from an eye level point of view. If somebody wants to know what's happening in Che, I think that it's something that other project doesn't have a much so high level of description. If then you're gonna look at the things that have changed in the last 6 months, and we have been updating that epic line by line, that's true. So that's not, and for those people, I think that it's true that there is something that we can fix. On the other end, I think that's not a question that you should ask. It's just that you could take and fix it. If you think that there is something that is not, so you're one of the people who have discussed these things. So milestone 1, milestone 2, milestone 3, you should be even better than me. You should know what's in those milestones. And the fact that you're asking me, because you know that those are not, I think that you know that's not updated, but you want to ask that just to provoke, right? That's why I think I'm saying it's provocative, right? That's if you didn't know that, if like you were a first-time user coming here and asking that genuinely, I would say, yeah, you're right. We need to address that. But you're somebody that has been working on that for months, and it looks like today you figure out that that's not updated. That hasn't been updated for months. So we're working on that, right? So for a team leads, I've been communicating to work on this milestone here, not on the epic, because we're not keeping. So those things are changing every day. So I'm not going to update it here. And if you find it as useful for somebody, go ahead, please, and fix it. Okay, so, but I think that's something that has been discussed enough. And yeah, I mean, there is the new and noteworthy. If there is anything else, any other questions, I would be happy to take it offline.
Yes, thank you, Mario. I think we should go to the next section, and we have few items here. And the first one from Floran, it's about new factory link parameter to specify the editor. Floran, would you like to present this?
Yeah, so today when you are using the factory workflow, so you can provide the link to a Che server, and then you provide the link of the repository. But when you do that, you don't have any way to plug your editor. So by default, it will always use the default editor, and in Che properties, the default editor is Chetia. So here, you can provide an additional setting, which is Che editor, and by providing the Che editor parameter, then you can override the default editor. So I provided a demo link as well. I don't know if you want to open the video, but In addition to providing the link to the repository, we add Editor, and here we provide the name of the editor from the plugin registry. So it means that it will open the dev file specified at the location, Spring Pet Clinic, and instead of using the default editor, it will use, in this case, the IntelliJ editor. So it's a useful way to customize the editor of a given project. That's all. Yeah. At the end, you just see IntelliJ and the project is cloned. It's another way to specify the default editor. So if you can provide some links to other people and say, okay, I want to use IntelliJ by default. And it's just for every links.
Thank you, Florian. Any questions here?
So Florian, did you change URL of link, or it's persisted in user preferences? How does it set?
So
as
here
default?
there is nothing that will be stored in the user preferences.
Mm-hmm.
It's a per link editor. So it's when you
specifically.
Yeah. There is another part of the issue that is to have in dashboard some user preferences where the user could be able to specify the editor that he wants by default. But it's another use case. And just to be able to specify the editor when you provide a link to someone.
Mm-hmm. I think it could be expanded to VS Code as well.
Yeah, you can use any editor. And here in the demo, I show it by using the key in the plugin registry. But you can provide as well the full link, the HTTP link to a custom editor as well.
Custom? Custom.
If you have feedback, you can comment on the issue, probably. Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Other questions?
Custom link. Custom link, not custom editor, yeah? Okay.
Anything else related to this item? If no, the next one from Serhiy Kabashnyuk, but I see that Serhiy is absent today, so if someone would like to present this item, please do it. If no, we can go to the next. Okay, let's go to the item number 3 and 4. I think Igor Vinokur could present it. Igor, could you start, please?
Yeah, hello everyone. So it's just an announcement that the OpenShift Connector plugin was updated from version 0.2.0 to version 0.2.9. It's the latest version so far. And basically, it has pretty much the same functionality as in the previous plugin, except some minor changes in UI. And basically, that's it about OpenShift Connector topic. And as for the Go update, so it's also an announcement. The Go version was updated in the Go sidecar. So it was updated from version 1.16.6 to 1.17.2. And basically, that's all the news.
Thank you, Igor. Maybe some questions related to these two topics. Okay, it look like that's it from our two sections for today. Maybe anything else you would like to discuss today? We have a few minutes. No, thank you everyone, and see you in a week. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.